City Times' weekly LGBTQ news updates. Jake manages all of those for you. Head to windycitytimes.com/newsletters. You can also follow Jake on Blue Sky. Just search for Jake Wittig, Wittich. And that is going to do it for us today. Thanks, everyone, for listening and or watching. Be sure to tune in to youtube.com/@thegailyshow. We've got all sorts of interviews and archives of our live episodes, breaking news through our shorts. Up next on WCPT 820 is Chew's Views with Richard Chew. On AM 950 Radio, it is the Matt McNeil Show. Stay tuned after that for Native Roots Radio, the only Native American radio show in the United States on a daily basis. And then at 10 p.m. Central, step into the unknown with Greg Bakken on Ghost Box Radio. And until this time tomorrow, keep it queer, America.
What is your healing power? Maybe your healing power is helping veterans with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, depression, anxiety, or loneliness. Is your healing power a simple, heartfelt letter or being a volunteer? It is estimated that over 500,000 current warfighters will return from service diagnosed with PTSD, and 22 veterans will commit suicide every day. Our veterans have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country. At healvets.org, you can find out more about the healing power of pen pals, volunteers, therapy kits, and more. Discover your healing power at healvets.org. Help Heal Veterans, together with you, has been helping one recovering veteran at a time. We are helping veterans heal together. What is your healing power? To find out about your power, visit healvets.org. This PSA is sponsored by Help Heal Veterans.
Are you excited about being a new grandmother?
Of course I am. A little intimidated, too.
Why?
Taking care of a baby today is so different than when I had you.
But, Mom, you did great with me.
Thanks, son. But I put you on your stomach to sleep.
Right. But now we know that babies should always be placed on their backs to sleep, for naps and at night, to reduce the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS.
You also slept with blankets and toys in your crib.
True. But now we know to keep everything out of the crib except for my sweet baby girl. No blankets, pillows, or other soft or loose items.
Daddy's going to teach Nana all the ways to keep you safe while you sleep. Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
For more tips on safe sleep for babies, visit safetosleep.nichd.nih.gov. That's safetosleep.nichd.nih.gov. Sponsored by the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development.
You are listening to WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk station, where facts matter and truth always wins. Stay informed, stay engaged.
AP News, I'm Marcela Sanchez. Federal agents are now being sent to San Francisco. AP correspondent Ben Thomas has more.
The U.S. Coast Guard says it's providing a base of operations for U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents in the San Francisco area. The San Francisco Chronicle reports 100 federal agents are expected to arrive at the base in Alameda starting Thursday. It's part of Trump administration efforts to track down immigrants in the country illegally. San Francisco's mayor and California's governor condemned the move, saying it's meant to provoke protests. President Trump has repeatedly mentioned deploying National Guard troops to San Francisco over crime concerns, as he has in other Democratic cities. Local and state leaders say crime in the city is at record lows and have vowed legal action. I'm Ben Thomas.
North Carolina's legislature gave final approval to redrawn congressional districts. They're designed to help Republicans win more U.S. House seats, something President Trump has called for. In debate, North Carolina Democratic Representative Gloristine Brown says the new congressional district map dismantles decades of voting rights progress.
Redrawn districts 1 and 3 is purposefully dilutions of black votes. North Carolina is the testing ground for the new era of Jim Crow laws, going after souls to the polls, restricting early voting dates, hours, and locations, and now breaking up the black belt that has been electing black Democrats for 3 decades now.
Republicans argue the redrawing was based not on race, but on gaining political advantage. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney set a goal for Canada to double its non-U.S. exports in the next decade, saying American tariffs are causing a chill in investment. And world shares were mixed today following a retreat on Wall Street. This is AP News. The Saudi Crown Prince will visit the White House next month. AP correspondent Leah has the details.
President Donald Trump's administration is preparing for a visit to the United States by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman next month. U.S. officials familiar with the plans for the trip say work is underway to prepare a package of agreements President Trump and the Crown Prince could sign or witness during the visit. That's according to several people familiar with the planning who spoke on the condition of anonymity. The planned visit will be the first to the United States by the Crown Prince since the killing of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul during Trump's first term in office in 2018. U.S. intelligence agencies said Prince Mohammed likely directed the killing. That resulted in U.S. sanctions against several Saudi officials. Prince Mohammed denies his involvement, but in the years since, both the Trump and Biden administrations have tried to mend ties with Saudi Arabia. Leah, Washington.
And I'm Marcela Sanchez, AP News.
This is 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see sunny skies here for today with a high in the mid-50s. Winds out of the northwest around 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting as high as 20. And then for tonight, mostly clear, a low near 36. By Friday, sunshine, a high of 54 degrees. Saturday, plenty of blue skies and sun, a high of 57. By Sunday, partial sunshine, a high around 59. That's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 39.
Save big money on all your electrical needs at Menards. From wire, tools, testers, and more, Southwire is the perfect choice for your next electrical project. They offer innovative products to help you get your project done right. Hurry in today and save big on all Southwire products at Menards. Plus, check out our weekly flyer on menards.com for more great deals happening this week.
Save big money at Menards.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew. Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that focuses on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Good Thursday morning, progressives. Chins up and shoulders back. It's time to fight. Yes, it is. And welcome to the October 23rd, 2025 edition of Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Find my show on Facebook Live, TuneIn Radio, heartlandsignal.com, and YouTube. You can email me at richard@WCPT820.com. And you guys have been emailing me pretty strong the last couple of days. Follow me on X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, Threads, and Substack. There you go. Catch all of our shows by subscribing to our WCPT podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. That's where you can subscribe. And, of course, that's where you can get Choose Views featured interviews, Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez, The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Out Chicago, and our other shows and interviews. And you can just make your way right over there to heartlandsignal.com. A couple of the updates on posts that we have. Let's see. Oh, yes, this is a good one. One of the guys that's running for Michigan Senate seat, GOP Senate candidate Mike Rogers. Basically, Michigan's going to see possibly 200 to 200 plus thousand Michiganders will lose their health care. And this guy is basically applauding the cut, saying that it's, we got to reduce the budget. The standard BS from a Republican in office and one running for office. So you'll want to check that nice piece out, that's article that's written there. And then one of the office directors for ICE spouting garbage as well. And so there's a couple good places over there that you guys should check out and make your way there to Heartland Signal on X for the clips and whatnot that we have. Today's show, our guest, our Representative Gene Wu from Texas. He's going to be with us. Well, we put together a recorded interview with him yesterday, so that'll be coming to you in the 6:30 hour today. And then at 7 o'clock, we will have Leah Litman, attorney, author, professor, discussing not only her book Lawless, but we'll also be talking about some of the things that are happening currently with ICE that are as it relates to the Supreme Court, and with how federal judges are being sort of trampled on by the Supreme Court. Interesting. So Leah will be with us for the hour from 7 until 8 today. So looking forward to chatting with her. And if you guys want to call in, if you got some questions regarding the Supreme Court, I did get some from you guys, and we'll try to add those to the process in talking with her. But if you guys want to call in, we'll have the lines open, and you can during that time to see if we can get you on to ask a question, or I may just ask it for you. But yeah, reach out to us, and we'll do our best to get you on. So that's what's happening there. But as we talk about Texas, Gene Wu, Texas representative, will be with us shortly, or that interview, I should say. But there's another young fellow that is really making some things and making some noise happen down in Texas. Check this out, progressives.
I've been a parent. You've never been a parent. He's running for Congress. I'm asking you this question to you. What is your plan to reduce the systematic crime in our communities?
I want to go and put back the funding that the stupid Republicans took out that was literally there for put trades inside of schools. You can call it rhetoric all you want, but you know what is the truth? When we have a district, when we have an 18th congressional district, where literally only 40% of the people that graduate from high school go to full-time employment, college, or the military, that means that we got to go and get people skills. We have one of the highest Gen Z unemployment rates in the history of this country. And the problem is that you guys took the money out. Yes, the Republican Party, they took it out. You know what? Not only did they go and take this out when Donald Trump was president, but they also, Republicans have been running this state for 30 straight years. My plan. I'm going to co-sponsor the Jobs Act from Senator Tim Kaine to allow for Pell Grants, not just to be used at college and university, but also to go and train people for energy production, for welding, and other things like that. I support tuition-free community colleges so people can go train themselves for the jobs of tomorrow. I believe and support investment tax credits to go create additional developments right here in the district. For example, the high-velocity development that was literally there to go do hydrogen hub production. I support those efforts. And you know who is against every single one of the things I mentioned? The Republican Party. And you know what? You can call it a boogeyman all you want. But the reality is that they take money out. They take investment out. And it's us that's trying to fix it.
That was a little bit of a debate, if you want to call it that. That was Isaiah Martin, who's running for Congress in Texas. The reason I wanted to play that, obviously, is a little bit of Texas Day with Gene Wu and also Isaiah. He says it. He speaks some truth there about Republicans. First of all, they do lie. Secondly, they take funding away from things that are going to actually improve the lives of the citizens that they say they represent. That's not just something that happens in Texas. That happens in every red-run state in the country. Or when there are Democrats in leadership, they do everything they can to block funding that goes to people to help people's lives. Everyday folks. Because they want the money to run uphill to their wealthy donors. That's a fact, y'all. That's not rhetoric. And, you know, let me isolate this as best I can. He talked about something that we don't talk about enough. He wants to sponsor this bill that Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia wants to have in place. And that's to make sure that some of the grant money goes towards skill development, not just four-year colleges. Because a lot of people, and when I had the opportunity last Wednesday to co-host the labor panel with Tom Hartman, one of the things that we talked about is that not everybody should be going to college, wants to go to college, or just needs to go to college. They have skills, and those skills might get tamped down, watered down if they go to college, when in fact, maybe if they went to a trade school and developed those skills, they'd be much better off, much happier, and in a better situation financially because they didn't absorb all this college debt. Or they may go into, there's a lot of guys and gals that are in broadcast engineering that have a degree in it, or they may have, they may not have gone to a 4-year school. They went to a trade school to learn engineering skills, et cetera, et cetera. So the point of all this is it's about skills development. President Obama has said this during his first term. We want to spend more of our resources developing our young men and women with skills, not just an education that they may not be able to use. Or if both are applicable, then great. So that's the thing that he really talks about a lot, Isaiah Martin does. We've had him on the show. We'll have him back on possibly in a week or so, because we got a little surprise that we're going to be doing the first week of November that will drop on you tomorrow, probably, if not the beginning of the following week. But that being said, here's the other thing, the other salient point I want to take away. We always hear about, and we hear it from the mainstream media, to be honest, and we hear it from a lot of Republican politicians and sometimes some people who are Democrats that lose their mind, that Democratic states or cities or communities or certain communities that are run by Democrats are just horrible and reckless and all those other things. He made a point that I want everybody to be reminded of. The Republicans have been in charge of the state legislature and on a federal, in terms of federally elected members of the House and Senate for 30 years. And Texas has got, they're bracing themselves for yet another, if we have a harsh winter and the weather blows through there, that state's going to shut down for a period of time. Illinois doesn't shut down, y'all. Whether it's hot or cold or somewhere in between, we don't shut down. So all those people that are whining about Illinois this, Illinois that, Chicago this, Chicago that, I ain't heard Chicago shutting down. I love Houston, folks in Houston. I love Dallas and my folks in Dallas. But we aren't shutting down. That state and those cities, if they have terribly inclement weather, they are probably going to shut down. Why? Because the governor and the Republican-run state can't get their heads out of their behinds long enough to fix the problems that they have there with their electrical and their power grid. And their biggest second largest oil producing state in the country after Alaska. I think I got my right. Yeah. We'll call it, they're in the top 5. Yeah. I don't need to be right about they're in the top 5, but they can't fix that. Mm-hmm. Same thing is true in many other red states. They've been led by Republicans for a number of years, in some cases a couple of decades. Worse in education, worse when it comes to health care. The list goes on. But yet, we always hear, the Democrats are, no, y'all running your own states into the ground. So, there you go. Florida. Weather, we're going to have issues again with, when we have go through our hurricane season. So, what Isaiah Martin said there briefly, and I'm elaborating on it a little bit more, red states run by red Republicans keep running the states into the ground. And they're propped up by who? Blue states, because of our federal contribution, dollars to the federal budget. There you go. Let's take a quick break, guys. The number, of course, is 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County in North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see sunny skies here for today with a high in the mid-50s. Winds out of the northwest around 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting as high as 20. And then for tonight, mostly clear, a low near 36. By Friday, sunshine, a high of 54 degrees. Saturday, plenty of blue skies and sun, a high of 57. By Sunday, partial sunshine, a high around 59. That's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 39.
WCPT replay.
Thank God former U.S. Attorney Glenn Kirshner is here.
Listen, we've gone from government of the people, by the people, and for the people to government against the people. That's where we are right now. In all things Donald Trump is doing, he's trying to hurt the American people, right? And, you know, the power that because look, no judge is going to save us. No prosecutor is going to save us. No politician is going to save us. If the Dems could have saved us, they would have done so already, right? They can't save us. It's up to us. And that's why I'm talking about how we have to wield our power. And we've got to get out there, you know, far more frequently in the streets in far bigger numbers peacefully, because we're the only ones who have the power to stop government against the people.
Keep listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Hey, guys, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being with us this morning. Of course, our number is 773-763-9278. We'll try to get your calls in, hopefully today with Leah Litman being on. Hopefully we can make that work. So fingers crossed, we'll try to coordinate all this. But right now, let's give you guys a couple of updates from Choose Views News today, October 23rd, 2025. In a pivot, Warner Brothers Discovery now says it's open to a sale. Remember I talked about this last week? Warner Brothers Discovery, the entertainment behemoth, preparing to split into two companies, they announced this week, and they will entertain offers after receiving unsolicited interest in their businesses. The company said it is reviewing the options after fielding multiple inquiries. Paramount, which was itself recently acquired by Skydance Media, is reportedly one of the interested parties. And that's one of the things that we pointed out to you guys last week. Skydance, Larry Ellison, and this whole deal that was put together is about looking to acquire. They already submitted a bid. Consolidation of media is not a good thing. We went through this at the end of the 90s, end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, and the change in the FCC laws is a big part of where we are today. All right, U.S., Australia did sign an agreement that bolstered the rare earth supply. The U.S. and Australia signed an agreement earlier this week aimed at increasing supplies of rare earth minerals. The Trump administration is working to reduce its reliance on China's command of the global market. And so the minister of Australia and Trump signed a deal where both countries would invest about $3 billion into critical mineral projects over the next 6 months. And I actually think that's a good thing. As I kind of did a little bit of research in that space, we don't want to see any singular country, I mean, unless it's us, selfishly. But I think this could be a good alliance. So, you know, we got to give credit where it's due in a space like this. Molson Coors to cut 9% of salaried jobs in the Americas. The Molson Coors company plans to eliminate about 400 salaried positions, or about 9% of its workforce in the Americas, as part of the restructuring under new CEO Rahul Goyal. Aiming to become a total beverage company, Molson Coors will focus on growing non-alcoholic offerings and energy drinks, as well as its core beer brands, as alcohol demands actually are declining. The U.S. makes update to its $100,000 H-1B visa fees. The U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services said that they're clarifying the existing HB1 visa holders residing in the United States that will not have to pay the newly announced $100,000 petition fee, including student visa holders, according to Bloomberg's legal group. We'll see how that plays out, but the fee will also be waived for current visa holders when renewing their H-1B status. Businesses and universities and immigration lawyers have challenged the Trump administration's crackdown on highly skilled foreign-born talent having to navigate those waters. Hundreds of famous names are calling for a stop to superintelligence efforts. A cohort of more than 850 prominent figures signed a statement published Wednesday that calls for a ban on the development of superintelligence. Notable names atop the list include Yoshua Bengio and Gregory Hinton, computer scientists widely considered to be quote, the godfathers of modern AI. Signatories warn that the prospect of superintelligence, AI that has surpassed human intelligence, raises concerns, many concerns, about national security, civil liberties, and much more. So we'll keep you posted there. And last but not least, disaster spending. And this one is something that is really critically important. And I'll do my best to keep you guys posted on this in the days and weeks to come. Disaster spending becomes a hidden economic driver. But that's not necessarily a good thing. With damage from natural disasters climbing over the last decade, the recovery industry has driven growth in ways economists are only beginning to understand, according to Bloomberg. The U.S. spent nearly $1 trillion on disaster cleanup over the year ending in June, up from inflation-adjusted 1990s average of $80 billion. The ripples are felt from insurers to trash haulers to engineers, with disaster spending accounting for 36%, or $7.7 billion of GDP growth since 2000. So we're spending money on fixing stuff that gets broken because of the weather. What's the real price of fossil fuels is the question that I pose. It's not just at the pump. It's in your premiums, your power bill, and your property taxes. So when we hear people on the right specifically say we don't have an issue with climate change or the weather, this is how the weather was, we've always gone. No, it's not true. And people sometimes think that folks are getting emotional about it or making the weather the boogeyman, but the numbers don't lie. So we all want to pay attention to this, and I'll do my best to keep you guys posted in that space. But this is a serious concern, and it's not just affecting the cost of energy per se in terms of gasoline if you use a combustible engine vehicle, but it's in, again, property taxes. It's in your insurance premiums, and actually federal funding toward items that could go toward actually sustaining people's lives. So there you go, guys. A couple of Choose Views news items on this, October 23rd, 2025, which means Halloween is right around the way. And guess what we're going to hear a lot next week, Henry? What song do you think we're going to hear a lot of next, starting this weekend through the end of next week and over? What song? Came out in the 80s. The artist is no longer with us. And it's played a lot during Halloween. And there's a sample inside of it from the late actor Vincent Price. You got it. It's right, and it's there's a lot of street dancing that comes with it. Yes. Henry's like, man, don't do that to me. It's too early in the morning, asking me questions and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So Halloween is right around the corner. It's next Friday. So the song "Thriller" by the late Michael Jackson is going to be played a lot over this next week because it does end up being at a lot of the parties and a lot of the get-togethers, and certainly you're going to see people dancing in the street to the song "Thriller." But there you go. Halloween's right around the corner. Guys, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be right into our interview segment that I had with Representative Gene Wu from Texas. So we'll hit this quick break, and away we go. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
Cashback is not available on gas in New Jersey and Wisconsin. $5,000. That's the average amount of money people in the U.S. are now spending on gas in a year. $5,000. That's crazy. If you drive, you have to download Upside, the free app that gives you cash back every time you get gas. That's right. You can earn real cash back with Upside just by buying the gas you're already buying. You can literally start earning cash back today.
I use Upside every time I fill up, and I've already made around $200-$300.
You're putting gas in your car anyway. Why not get real cash back? If you like free money, download Upside.
I'm saving the cash I earn from using Upside to help pay for a vacation later this year.
Download the free Upside app now to earn cash back every time you buy gas. Use promo code MEGA25 to get an extra 25 cents per gallon on your first tank. You can cash out anytime right to your bank, PayPal, or a gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Upside app and use promo code MEGA25 for a 25 cents per gallon bonus on your first tank. That's code MEGA25 for a 25 cents per gallon bonus.
You're listening to WCPT 820. Here's the latest Chicago weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see sunny skies here for today with a high in the mid-50s. Winds out of the northwest around 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting as high as 20. And then for tonight, mostly clear, a low near 36. By Friday, sunshine, a high of 54 degrees. Saturday, plenty of blue skies and sun, a high of 57. By Sunday, partial sunshine, high around 59. That's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 39.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chu.
Hey, guys. Welcome back to the show. Like I said, yes, we had an opportunity to talk with Texas State Representative Jean Wu. So here we go. Welcome back, progressives. Of course, to Choose Views. We're always excited when we have some of our leading voices that take some time out of their schedule to chat with us. And if you guys remember back this summer, the Texas state representatives, many of them, decided to leave the state of Texas as part of the quorum breaking and pushback to the governor, Greg Abbott. And we were honored to have them and welcome them to the state of Illinois, and more specifically here in the city of Chicago. But with us this morning is one of those members, Texas State Representative Jean Wu, who decided to hang out with us for a little bit. Representative Wu, welcome to the show. Welcome to Choose Views on WCPT.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for being with us, man. Oh man, I got a chance to chat with you for a half a second when you were here and you were doing the bus tour through the city and stopped at one of the churches. It was great to meet you, and you were busy, and you were in your contemplative mode, as I like to call it. Whenever I see a picture of you, or oftentimes you have that look on your face that I got to get stuff done. So. It's one of the great things about how you represented the state of Texas. Tell us what's been going on. Tell us what's been happening these past few weeks in the state, what you guys have been doing in the legislature, and how you guys have been navigating.
And I mean, I think we should start off. I mean, let's be like 1,000% clear about what Abbott and actually Donald Trump were trying to do. Right. All this started because, you guys remember back in 2020, Donald Trump lost the election, and he called up Georgia and said, hey, if you can find me, some more votes, I don't care where you get them from, find me some more votes. Right. And the Georgia, 2020, they said, hell no, we're not doing that.
Nope.
Well, a lot's changed in 4 years, because now Donald Trump calls up Greg Abbott and other Republican governors and say, hey, I don't care where you find them, find me some more votes, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, we'll do it. And this is what they're doing right now. So the part of why we broke quorum, why we left the state, why we made such noise going out there, was because we had to warn the whole country that this is far, far, far beyond the norms of politics. This is so far beyond the normal things that we do in politics. This is not D versus R anymore. This is them versus America, right? Because the concept of a representative democracy, the concept that if you don't like your elected officials, you can get rid of them, they're throwing that out the window. They're making it so that every red state, every blue state, that it only matters what the party bosses want and what the donors want and not what the people want. This is bad for everybody. And so, look, we fought it off as hard as we could. And our main objective wasn't that. Our main objective was to get America awake, right? They keep making fun of people being woke. We need people to be woke, now. Get your asses up, wake up, snap out of it. We've been living in this nightmare for decades now, and we don't know how to get out of it. We need to wake up. That's not what it's supposed to be. That's not reality. That's not what America's supposed to be. This is all wrong. Everything is wrong. And we need people to say, no, it's not supposed to be like this. It doesn't have to be like this. And I think we're seeing it. How's it going? Look, this last weekend, 7 million Americans were in the streets, right?
Yep.
And they keep trying to downplay it, but like, baby, like they keep saying like, whoa, they paid them like $200 million in cash to get all those protesters. Like, where's my money? Where's my guy?
I saw this great post on social media yesterday, Representative Wu, where someone said, so they're running around saying that the Democrats got funded by all these protesters and the standard line of BS that they throw at us was funded by George Soros. And that he, paid people all this money to be out and protest. And then someone said, well, if that were the case and Republicans, GOP, MAGA folk were as smart as they want to call themselves, then why didn't a bunch of them show up at a rally, a protest, get paid, they're part of it, and then have the receipts to actually show that there's some truth to the BS that they're trying to run up on us. And I just thought that was a great way of looking at it. Folks like you and me, we know it's insanity. We know it's stupid. We know it's their normal pushback. They got their typical boogeyman. And when I hear that sort of George Soros paid for, I sit back and say, Representative Wu, okay, so what if he did? Because Elon Musk dropped $250 million to help get this dude in the White House. So you all need to stop whining about what George Soros is doing. Larry Ellison dropped a few dollars to get the wiggle room to get this Paramount Skydance deal done. So you don't need to shut up on this, what Democratic donors are doing, because you all have a much bigger pot of folk that are dropping money on your effort.
No, but that's exactly it. What we do, they say that's monstrous and it's terrible, but they end up doing it 10 times, 100 times more. As much, they want to say George Soros is basically the only billionaire who funds anything. And by the way, as someone who begs George Soros for money for a lot of Democrats, I wish it was that easy to get money from George Soros. Right?
He'd be broke. He'd be broke.
It is so hard to get money from them. But you have we just went through the scandal of all these Republican talking heads got found out because they were paid tens of millions from the freaking Russian government to spread their propaganda, and we all forgot about it.
Yep.
What the hell?
Short-term
How did
memory.
you forget that you have talking heads who are still on the air today who are essentially Russian propagandists? You work for another foreign government.
That's right. And again, that's not being called out, not being talked about. But I like how you reminded us that this all started, meaning you guys from the great Texas state, representative caucus decided that one of the things that I heard a lot, Representative Wood, and you probably heard this too, but I remember people saying, well, and Abbott was at the tip of the spear of saying, well, we're gonna remove them from their seats. We're gonna do this because they're not doing their job. I took that differently, but I'm from Chicago. I was like, wait a minute, they're actually doing their job, which is to stand in the void for the people of the state of Texas. They're doing the job. And that's to say no to the governor. We're not going to let you just very easily run this up on us just because you got a phone call from your big daddy Donald to say that we need a few more seats down there in Texas. So you are doing the job as I look at it. And,
absolutely. Look, when we use our brains, we use our voices, we use our votes whenever we can to get what our people need and to protect our communities. But when all that fails, the only thing we have left to do is throw our bodies onto the train tracks, right? Yeah. And if it slows it down, it slows it down. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But we're going to do it because that is what is demanded of us. When all Americans, when the time comes, when the call is there for you to make a sacrifice, when a call is there for you to say to step up and to take responsibility for your own part of this country, will you do it?
Yeah, that's a question that a lot of people are now having. They're being forced to answer that question. We've been asking it for a long time. But then now people are, and that's what I think this weekend's protest really showed, that there are a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. Mayor Johnson, we had on earlier He talked a little bit about that, and it was great to have him really just, line it out and say, no, we've done a lot of good things, but we got a lot more work to do, and people need to stay plugged into what's happening, not just, here in Chicago, the state of Illinois, the state of Texas, but the rest of the country. Because what you guys did, and I said this when I talked to other representatives that were here at the time, I said what you guys did wasn't just about the state of Texas. It was about the whole country, because we know that those seats will impact the voting for the entire country in this upcoming election. Yes. And that's why it was such an important thing to everybody to be aware of. It was like, hey, wait a minute, we're ringing the alarm bells in a big way, because this is a national issue. And right now, Representative, we'll talk about how you see. I say this often on my show, that what's happening in a local community, whether it be city council or whether it be anything bigger than that, everything that's local is national, and everything that's national is local. Yes. Talk a little bit about how you see that as a representative from the state of Texas.
Yeah, no, look, the saying in politics goes is all politics is local. And any politician who forgets that, and I think many of them have forgotten that, is going to pay the price for it. So right now, I'm sure that everyone else who can watch, who can see with their own eyes, knows that the country's on fire. And we're not just talking about politically, we're talking about economically, we're talking about socially. Americans are being laid off left and right. People are losing their jobs today. They're going to be losing their houses next month, right? Farmers are going under everywhere around the country. You know what, Texas? Agriculture, we moved on from agriculture being a big part of Texas economy, but it's still a significant part of the Texas economy. And our big producers here are rice, corn, or soybean, corn, and beef, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? Mexico, Canada, and China are not buying from the United States. Our 1, 2, and 3 largest trading partners: corn, soybean, and beef, right? China announced that it's going to not buy natural gas or LNG, oil and gas products from the United States as well. What do you think Texas produces? Why do you think gas prices are dropping so fast? Because no one is buying our stuff, right? That's also tax revenue. And this is happening across the nation. But if you look at Republicans, they're not saying a word. Who represents the rural community in this country, right? Yeah. The places that vote 80, 90% Republican are burning. They're on fire. People are losing everything they've ever worked for, and the Republicans are dead silent about it. And if you don't know or don't care or cannot articulate the fact that your people are in trouble, that your community is burning, you don't need to be there.
You don't deserve to be there. Because at some point, and I know that a lot of times for folks like you and me, we sit back and go, what the hell, y'all? How could you not see that? And this is the part that I know that as someone that's elected, I know that that your counterparts, I don't call them colleagues, they're your counterparts, they see it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, and you as a dad, I know that you particularly probably lean into this and how you were raised, folks see it. So it's worse when folks see it and don't do a damn thing about it than when people maybe not see it and they have it. Oh, wow. I really didn't know that. Yeah. But when somebody sees it, Representative Wu, and they don't do anything about it, that to me is a bigger crime. That's a bigger, it's just worse, plain and simple. So talk about that.
1,000%, 1,000%. I mean, look, this is the conversation I have in the legislature all the time. And Lord help me, I know that there are legislators in the body who are just ignorant, right? Who are just uneducated, uninformed, and just, they're just dumb. And when they say, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, I say, yeah, okay, fair. I'm sure you didn't. But there's plenty of people who are smart, who have degrees, who have the education, who have the who have the background, who have the understanding, and they know. And they still voted that way. I said, what's worse? Not knowing or knowing what to do, but doing the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Tell me which one is evil. The person who doesn't know what the right thing is, or the person who knows what the wrong thing is and chooses it intentionally, Right?
I would say that obviously the latter, and you and I are unapologetically biased in that space, but that's a good thing to be biased about. You know better, and you choose to do that. Yeah. That's why right now, Representative Wu, Donald Trump, I don't blame him for anything right now. I mean, I really don't. I'm like, I know who that dude is. I grew up with those kinds of dudes, and you probably did too. We know who that is, but it's the people that are around, and the around isn't just the administration. I'm saying, and you see it right there in Texas, the entire GOP, because listen, they got the numbers. If they wanted to fix this, they'd fix it overnight. All this craziness and this harm and this garbage that's going on, Republicans can fix it overnight if they really give a darn about it. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're absolutely right. But the problem is their chance to fix it was in 2016. Mm-hmm. And they chose expedience over America. They chose the easy political path to gain power for themselves versus doing what is right for this country. And they're doing this time and time again. And look, everything that's happening right now reinforces the old saying. All right, the quote that says, all that needs for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what you're watching. And this is, I tell people, I don't believe that there are good Republicans anymore, because the ones with principles and spines have gone. The ones who are willing to know better, but who are willing to speak up and to take the consequences for speaking up, they're gone. The only people left are either those without principles or those who have principles but lack the fortitude to stand up and say it, right?
And I can roll with the ones that may lack the fortitude or at least don't, maybe change that back to what you said. They don't know. Yeah. And those may be the ones that are somewhat gettable, if we want to use that terminology, but the ones that know better and they choose to not do better, they choose evil, really don't have a lot of time for those folks at all. And I applaud you for standing in the void when you know that those folks are around you every day as a legislator. We're talking with Representative Jean Rue from Texas, and you're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago, WARR 1520 AM, and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. Representative, one of the things that I've been dying to ask you or dying to talk to you about is, as an African-American man, I look at things from a slightly different lens, as I should. Of course. And you, as a Chinese American man, you look at things from a different lens. And you posted I don't know who you were talking to. I didn't recognize the individual, but I know you probably know where I'm headed. But you posted a video. There was a video posted of you in a conversation when you were talking with a gentleman, and it starts off where you say, "I always tell people." And you know which one I'm talking about. You're having a conversation with someone about unity and about folks coming together. And you remember, you know which one I'm talking about, where you speak to the fact that if more of us as Asian brothers and sisters and African-American brothers and sisters and other communities were to come back together.
My interview with Mr. Vargas.
Yes, but you said it from a different perspective, not a different perspective, but you said it from a perspective of taking responsibility.
Do you want me to say it?
Go for it.
Let me just say it. Speaking to all Asian Americans in this country, I need all of you to be aware of the history of our people in this nation, from the brutality that was visited upon us from our first entry to using our people as the guinea pigs for the first weaponization of immigration in the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, to the complete ban of Asian people from this nation from 1882 to 1965, where our people were not allowed into this country, right? Like, this is a history. But I want you to also understand that you were allowed into this country after the passage of the Civil Rights Act. And that did not pass without the shedding of African American blood, right? African Americans fought and died for your right to be in this country and for you to have the success that you have today. You would not have that but for the blood that has been spilled onto the streets. And I need all of you to recognize that reality. And the reality that the tree of liberty is watered with the blood of patriots. African Americans have died and were beaten and tortured and arrested and jailed for your civil rights right now. And if you want to maintain them, you have to fight for them now. It was given to you before. You need to fight for them now. That's it.
I think it's profound. When I when I first saw it the very first time, I got choked up because it's what we need to hear from all of our leaders of color, of whatever, wherever we are on the bandwidth of color, because it goes back to what Lyndon Johnson said. And, I'll paraphrase it and wreck it, but we are in a moment now where that divisiveness is about separating our communities. And I keep telling folks, and I know you do as well, that's exactly what they're trying to do is to divide and conquer us and pit us against one another. Meanwhile, they're leaning back and chuckling and saying, look, we got them fighting against each other. Yeah. The converse to that was this weekend. I strongly believe that. And when I talk to folks about it in these last few days, that's something that a lot of people I'm reminding people of. A lot of people are coming together, but kudos to you, Representative Wu, for speaking that truth. And that statement is not a denigration of your community or specifically. It's an inspiring one to say, listen, if we work together like we have in the past, we're going to get some stuff done. So let's get about that.
Look, a strong part of overall Asian culture is a recognition of the past, is a recognition of history, is a recognition of ancestry, is a recognition of those who have built what you stand upon today. That is a strong part of history. We have strong reverence for our ancestors, for our elders, because of that. It's like, you would not be here but for their work. And we're saying to the Asian community, keep that perspective. Understand what you stand on was built by others. That your payment for the future is your continuation, your maintenance of this foundation, and for you to build on top of it for the next generation to stand upon, right?
Yep.
And I think, look, what has happened to the Asian American community in this country is a very particular type of racism, right? Where you use the mindset and the ignorance of a community to bolster their own inherent racism against other communities.
Wow.
Lie to them to convince them that they are superior. Right. I mean, one of my big things is fighting against the myth of the model minority. This is the point blank racism against Asian Americans. Right. But so rare is it that you have a racist stereotype that is being pushed by the community it's against. You have Asian American pushing the model minority myth, right? And I keep trying to tell them, do you understand? Every time you push the idea that Asian Americans are different from all the other minorities, we're good at math, we don't get mad, we work hard, you understand what they're saying is you're not really Americans.
Yep.
Because Americans, when you insult Americans, they get pissed. When you get them really riled up, they go out and protest. They demand what they want, they'll get in your face. If they don't get what they want, they stop working, all this stuff. When you say Asian Americans don't do that, you're saying we're different. We're not really Americans, which then allows them to do the things like the Japanese incarceration, like the Chinese Exclusion Act, like what's happening today, that laws that banned Asian people from owning property 100 years ago and were repealed after the passage of the Civil Rights Act are now being put back into law right now. The state of Texas this year passed the alien land law here.
Yep.
Just as more than half the states in the nation have already. And our community doesn't even know that they've done. In Texas, if you are a Chinese immigrant and you've done nothing, you could be a refugee. You are not allowed to own property.
Yeah. It's the thing that was so eloquent about what you said in that interview with Vargas and what you've just said again this morning, repeating it, is that you know it to your core. I mean, you spoke those words like you wrote those words, you believe those words, you know where they come from because you do understand our collective history. And right now, with all the craziness that's going on, all the things that we see, it is about one simple thing, and that's to have a Christian white a Christian white straight male as at the top of the food chain and nobody else.
Right.
And I've been saying for the longest time, Representative Wu, the minute that the rest of us remember that there are more, literally, not just in sound bites, but there are more of us who oppose that than those who are trying to oppress us.
Yes.
Into this, that we come together, and that's why your video struck me so hard. It's because I was like, listen, y'all, we got to stop fighting against each other and fighting with each other to fight forward.
Yes.
So
look, what my firm belief is this. I think that there are all these communities in America who are being oppressed, whether you're Black, Latino, Asian, Muslim, Jewish, LGBTQ, whatever your community is. I hope that one day all of these communities can stop fighting each other and instead turn around and see whose boot is on their necks.
Yep.
And the day that every community turns around at the same time and looks and sees it's the same boot on the same foot, that's the day we start winning. That's the day we start winning, because once we know what the collective enemy is and not each other, we can win this because we're the clear majority. The people in this country who want equity, who want justice, who want inclusion, who want all these things. They want America to be America. They want America to be a shining beacon on the hill, spreading democracy to the rest of the world, to be the shining bright light that tells the rest of the world, this is the way you act. This is the way a country that's made for the people, by the people, should look like.
Yep.
Right? And I know that if we all put down the knives that we have pointed at each other, the day we come together is the day we win.
I keep telling so many people this, Representative Wu, that, we all know as progressive liberal Democrats, however we're labeling ourselves, that we've got our issues and we've got to work through them. We've got to elect the right people that are going to represent all of us. I get that. We've made mistakes as a Democratic Party in the past, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But our mistakes pale to the carnage that's coming from not just the White House, but the entire GOP party right now.
Yep.
And so we've got to stop. I had a listener send me a text, and I can't repeat the words on the air, even in our moment. They said, the Democratic voices have got to stop crapping on each other.
Right.
We have to stop doing that right now. It's time has passed. Yeah, we probably need some younger chronological voices in the conversation. We probably need some different. There's no question about any of that. However, we've got to stop fighting against each other and turn our energies toward truly the oppressor in this moment, and that's the Republican Party in its entirety. So I appreciate you standing on business and being unapologetic in the need for us to come together and fight towards what we got to get done. It's powerful. It's a powerful message, Representative Wu. You've been busy. We know that. What's on your? I ask this question oftentimes. What's on your whiteboard of things that you want to make sure are getting done in Texas, given that you guys don't have the numbers that you once had? So
look, here's the easy thing. If you want to talk about reality and what this world is coming to, assuming we have future elections, and I joke about, like 6-8 months ago, I used to say that jokingly. Now I say that with all seriousness. If we have future elections, if we have an election in 2026, I think it's going to be really good for Democrats, right? But we shouldn't frame it in that way. I think if we are able to have elections in 2026, in November 2026, I think this is going to be really good for America. They're really good for Americans, right? And I think we have a chance. Like we're on our timeline right now, right? Mm-hmm. And we're in this crazy ass timeline, and we have this nexus point that we're coming up to that we can make a choice, right? And the choice is, do you want America to continue or not, right? Because again, America is not just a place. America is not just a flag or whatever else. America is an idea. America is one of the few places in the world that was created for the people, and by the people, right?
Yep.
And if that is no longer what we want, if we say, let's go back to having kings, let's go back to having queens and dukes and archdukes and duchesses who rule over us, we can go back to that. We kicked out King George. If you want to invite him back in, we can.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a choice Americans have to make right now. And if people are saying, okay, let's go back to kings. Okay, fine, right? But I think there's enough of us who say, hell no, right? We really liked it when it was for the people and by the people, right? We really like that. We want to keep it. I need everybody who gives a crap about that. Everybody who says, you know what? I really like the phrase, I don't agree with what you say, but I will fight to the death to defend your right to say it. I need those people. I need those people to gear up, right? I need those people to wake up and saying, our nation, our principles, the very founding ideas of us are under attack. Look at what's happened to the White House yesterday. There could not be a greater symbol of the destruction of what is America than this forceful tearing down of the White House in the middle of a federal shutdown while millions are going to starve and go lose their jobs and lose their homes. We're building a $250 million golden ballroom.
Yeah.
If there was a better symbol of fiddling while Rome burns, I don't know it. Right? Yeah. And if we need everybody who says that's wrong, we shouldn't be doing that. This is not the country we know. We voted to make this country better. Now it's gotten even worse. If you had a part in making it this way, then take your responsibility and fix it. If you had a part in Donald Trump being elected, either because you didn't vote or because you voted for him, it is now your responsibility to personally be a part of the effort to fix this.
Suit up and get ready for the fight. Don't sit back and whine alone. Get in the fight. Representative Jean Wu from Texas. It's so great to have you on the show this morning. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me. Stay safe, Representative.
Thank you.
We're here for you way up in Chicago, as you probably figured out when you guys were here. We'd love to have you back on the show again.
Lots of love to Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. Back at you, Representative. Talk with you soon. Stay safe, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Bye now.
This is a WCPT 820 Heartland Signal News Minute.
It is my understanding that we have not been called back because the majority party, which is the Republicans, they do not have enough votes in the House or the Senate in order to get this bill across.
It's Indiana State Representative Carolyn Jackson, a Democrat who represents Hammond and serves as ranking minority member of the House Committee on Elections and Apportionment. She was speaking to WCPT's Patty Vasquez about Republican legislation to redraw Indiana congressional districts to further advantage Republicans in an already gerrymandered state.
If this redistricting is to take place, we only have 2 Democratic seats in Congress. So if we lose those 2 seats, we will have none.
Yeah.
What that means is we will lose the voice of over 400,000 Hoosiers.
For WCPT 820 and Heartland Signal, I'm Andy Miles.
Nothing makes a gathering great like Eggland's Best Eggs. They're just so delicious, with better nutrition, too. For us, it's eggs any style, as long as they're the best. Eggland's Best.
AP News, I'm Marcela Sanchez. Vice President J.D. Vance criticized Israel's parliament vote on West Bank annexation.
I mean, what I would say to that is when I asked about it, somebody told me that it was a political stunt, that it had no practical significance. It was purely symbolic. I mean, look, if it was a political stunt, it was a very stupid political stunt, and I personally take some insult to it. The West Bank is not going to be annexed by Israel. The policy of the Trump administration is that the West Bank will not be annexed by Israel. That will continue to be our policy. And if people want to take symbolic votes, they can do that. But we certainly weren't happy about it.
The vice president wrapped up his visit in Israel today. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said he would be traveling to Israel this week. In a speech, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada will double its non-U.S. exports.
This decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship with the United States is now over. And as a consequence, many of our former strengths as a country, former strengths more particularly as our economy, strengths based on close ties to America, have become our vulnerabilities.
That's audio from the Canadian Network Pool. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced a military strike against a suspected drug boat in the Pacific Ocean. 3 people were killed. This is the second strike in 2 days in the Pacific, following 7 in the Caribbean. The U.S. Coast Guard says it's providing a base of operations for U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents in the San Francisco area. World shares were mixed today following a retreat on Wall Street. Crude prices jumped more than $2 after President Trump announced sanctions on Russian oil giants. And the U.S. government's gross national debt has surpassed $38 trillion, according to the latest Treasury Department report. More on this and other stories at apnews.com. This is AP News. It was a night of mixed results for the NBA's top 3 draft picks in their professional debuts.
Man, yeah, that was crazy.
20-year-old rookie and 3rd overall NBA draft pick VJ Edgecombe finished with 34 points in a 117-116 win in Boston, recording the 3rd most points in an NBA debut and the most since Wilt Chamberlain's record 43 in 1959. Edgecombe scored 14 points in the first quarter, surpassing LeBron James' record 12 in his 2003 debut.
Feels great to have my name mentioned, LeBron name.
Elsewhere, reigning top pick Cooper Flagg struggled in his debut with the Mavericks, scoring just 10 points on 4 of 13 shooting in a 125-92 loss to the Spurs.
Not great. I mean, obviously didn't play incredibly well.
Number 2 pick Dylan Harper of San Antonio debuted with 15 points. Gethin Coolbaugh, Boston.
And I'm Marcela Sanchez, AP News.
This is 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see sunny skies here for today with a high in the mid-50s. Winds out of the northwest around 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting as high as 20. And then for tonight, mostly clear, a low near 36. By Friday, sunshine, a high of 54 degrees. Saturday, plenty of blue skies and sun, a high of 57. By Sunday, partial sunshine, a high around 59. That's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 39.
Keeping your engines healthy means protecting them in season and out. Experts trust Stable to do that, and third-party testing confirms it. Stable is the industry leader in preventing fuel-related issues, no matter if you use it in your car, boat, or outdoor power equipment. In season or out, at every fill-up or when you store, start with Stable.
You're listening to WCPT 820, because facts matter.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chu.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Thanks to Representative Gene Wu from Texas for hanging with us. What a great, powerful voice he has, and I'm so proud and grateful to have had a chance to chat with him for that interview. And so, keep giving those guys support down in Texas, the Texas State Dems. We need to be in their corner. Today on Live, Local, and Progressive, Joan Esposito will be joined by Keenan Collins, gun violence prevention and healthcare advocate from the west side of Chicago, who's running for Congress in the Congressional 7th District. Immigration attorney Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, Heartland Signal's Rich Eberwine with 3 stories you might have missed from our digital newsroom, I should say, and Illinois Congressman Brad Schneider. Live, Local, and Progressive, weekdays 2 to 5, here on WCPT, heartlandsignal.com, and tune in. Tonight on Driving It Home, Patty Vasquez will be joined by co-host Ken Mejia Beal, and their guests are Dan Schaefer, creator of the Recombination Area and political editor at Civic Media Wisconsin, Nathan Taylor of the Election Truth Alliance. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez, weekdays 5 to 7, Central, WCPT AM 820, Heartland Signal website, tune in, YouTube, and that thing called Facebook. And on tomorrow's show, Ev Shin, author of Choosing to Lead Against the Current, the Courageous Operating System for Change Makers, will be with us. Our good friend Karen Byrne from True Blue Politics podcast, Kevin Schultz, professor of history at UIC and author of Why Everyone Hates White Liberals, including white liberals. So they'll be with us tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Yeah, we got smart people that are part of our show. I'm so grateful of that. In May 2024, the New York Times reported that a strange flag had flown over the home of Justice Samuel Alito. Alito was appointed to the Supreme Court in 2006 by President George W. Bush, a Republican. 15 years later, January 2021, rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol to protest the 2020 presidential election that the Republican candidate Donald Trump lost. A few days after the January 6th riot, the Alitos raised an upside-down American flag. Inverted flags had long symbolized a nation in distress, but had more recently become associated with the Stop the Steal movement, which aimed to overturn the 2020 presidential election. But fear not, Alito insisted he had no involvement in flying the flag. LOL. That is the introduction from one of my favorite new books, Lawless, How the Supreme Court runs conservative grievance, fringe theories, and bad vibes. And that is from professor of law at the University of Michigan, co-host of the Strict Scrutiny podcast, and author of that book, New York Times bestseller, Lawless. Good morning, Professor, and welcome to Choose Views on WCPT.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me again.
Absolutely. It's great to have you with us. I wanted to let folks know to open their eyes and we get a copy of Lawless because, guys, I'm telling you, the interesting thing about the book, Professor, is that it is so, and take this the right way, it's so basic in how you've written it. And I mean that in the most complimentary of ways. And even, folks like Ellie Mastal and Lawrence Tribe who actually praise the book, say it in their own way. It's such a basic read because of the way in which you wrote it. And that's one of the things as I've been reading through it more and more that I like about it, because you just make this very, very simple case about the lawlessness of this current Supreme Court, and more specifically the current conservatives on the Supreme Court. So I just want to sing your praises one more time of the book, and thank you for sharing some copies with us to get out to people that are our listeners.
Well, thank you for your kind words. And that really means a lot. I wanted the book to be accessible and kind of a breezy read because this isn't a happy story. And I think it's so important for more people to understand what the heck is going on with the Supreme Court.
Yeah, man, right now, I mean, I had listeners send me questions that they may want to ask you. And if we have some callers that have a question that's relevant, then we may put them on, but we'll keep that. We'll see how we go. But right now, there are some big issues that are taking place in the country that the Supreme Court is weighing in on, and I wish that they wouldn't, but we know that based on, the justices that are the conservative justices, that they're going to weigh in on them. And right now, the big one happens to be the voting rights case and where SCOTUS is when it comes to Section 2. If you could take a moment and kind of re-explain to our listeners all over the country what that is all about, what's it based on, and what you see in this potential case that's coming in front of the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. So the case is about the future of what remains of the Voting Rights Act, which I think it's important to emphasize is probably the most important and most successful piece of civil rights legislation in this country. In 1965, it was the Voting Rights Act that really made the United States into a democracy, because before that time, Black Americans were not allowed to vote. They were not included in the polity. And when the Voting Rights Act was enacted, it had two big main provisions. One was known as the preclearance process, and it required certain states and jurisdictions with especially bad histories of racial discrimination in voting to get the federal government's permission before they changed their voting laws or policies. The second provision is what's at issue in this case, and that is Section 2. And Section 2 is a nationwide ban on voter discrimination. A little over 10 years ago, the Supreme Court struck down the preclearance process in Shelby County versus Holder. And in that opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts said, look, we as a country, we no longer need Section 5, the preclearance process, because Section 2, this nationwide ban on voter discrimination, that's good enough. And that will continue to do all the work needed once preclearance is no longer with us. Well, what are they poised to do now? Potentially dismantle the Voting Rights Act's critical protections for the political power of minority voters. Because what happened is, after the Voting Rights Act restricted states' ability to adopt preconditions to voting, like you have to pass a literacy test, or you have to guess how many magic beans there are in this jar. After the Voting Rights Act made it illegal for states to adopt those preconditions to voting, what states did is they found other ways of ensuring that Black voters would be locked out of political power. And one of those ways was through gerrymandering, through drawing legislative districts in ways that ensured Black voters would always be the minority in every single district and therefore never have the opportunity to elect candidates, to actually have political power. So the Voting Rights Act was actually amended in the 1980s to prohibit those kinds of practices that have the effect of effectively locking out Black voters from power and reducing their political power. So the question in this case is basically, is it illegal for the Voting Rights Act to prohibit states from diluting Black voters' political power? Like, the case really comes down to that, because the argument is that by telling legislatures they can't draw districts in ways that lock out Black voters and other racial minorities and language minorities from political power, the Voting Rights Act requires states to take into account whether racial and language minorities are represented in the districts they draw. And apparently that is racial discrimination that Congress cannot engage in. But the court doesn't seem to think it is racial discrimination when primarily white state legislatures draw districts in ways that just so happen to make it so white voters are overrepresented and minority voters are locked out of political power. So again, the question is, can Congress remedy those situations where states draw districts in ways that lock out minority voters from political power?
I put my pen down, sort of. You know what that means. I stop writing and just listen to what the professor has to say. And I appreciate you breaking that down and helping people understand not only what it means, but the historical importance of the Voting Rights Act, Sections 5 and Section 2. It's important for people to understand by engaging in and educating themselves on what this means. The big overarching thing, I think, Professor Litman, is that this is yet another time where the Supreme Court said they were going to leave certain things alone, and particularly with justices in their hearings, said they weren't going to touch Roe v. Wade. It's a settled law. They are going to touch other things. It's settled law. We weren't, certain cases, we don't know if we'll take them. Amy Coney Barrett was frankly masterful in dodging the questions that were very pointed to her and asking, how do you see certain potential cases or potential issues in the country that could become cases? And she danced around and danced around. And so now here we are. She's the actual justice, if I have my information right. That's the one that's sort of the gatekeeper on what's happening not only with Section 2, but what's going on in North Carolina. And is she the handle on that, or is another justice?
Well, so when the Supreme Court heard a Voting Rights Act challenge that was quite similar to this case 2 years ago, that case was out of Alabama, and it too was a frontal assault on the future of the Voting Rights Act. the Supreme Court narrowly avoided striking down or effectively nullifying the Voting Rights Act in that case. But Justice Barrett, in that case, actually voted with the other Republican appointees like Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, and Justice Gorsuch. They would have effectively taken the legs out from under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act in that case. It was actually the Chief Justice and Justice Brett Kavanaugh who joined with the 3 Democratic appointees 2 years ago to allow the Voting Rights Act to continue to be enforced. So I think court watchers were really watching and listening to what Brett Kavanaugh and the Chief Justice were saying in the oral argument in this case about the future of the Voting Rights Act, because I think people were worried, rightfully so, 2 years ago when Justice Kavanaugh joined with the majority to allow the Voting Rights Act to continue to exist, because he wrote separately to suggest he was still open to striking down what remained of the Voting Rights Act, just on like a slightly different theory than what Alabama had presented in that case. So I actually think a lot of court watchers are more focused on the Chief Justice and Brett Kavanaugh right now than they are on Justice Barrett, who, of course, has sometimes joined with the Chief and the Democratic appointees to form a majority. But I think that has happened more so in cases challenging what the Trump administration is doing rather than voting rights.
Yeah, that's true. And we could take each of the individually each of the conservative justices, if you will, and break down how what they've supported and where they've landed. But I want to come back to something that you talked about earlier when it says that when you were breaking down what's happened with Section 5 and with Section 2. A lot of people are just flat out saying it in the most transparent terms possible. It is, white American communities saying that they are being discriminated against because they're white, and that they should have, if there's a majority of people in a state that are white, then the district should represent the population being mostly white. And so the Voting Rights Act doesn't, and help us with this, it's not really designed to solve that argument. It's designed to solve the oppression of voting against other people that are not white. Do I have it right in terms of how to kind of splice that apart?
Yes, no, I think that that's absolutely right. The Voting Rights Act is really designed to address pretty specific problems that include residential racial segregation, where you have a state that is very segregated as far as where people live, then it should be easier for the state to draw districts that ensure minorities who are segregated as far as where they live in the state. It should be easier to draw districts where those minorities can actually be in the majority and elect the candidate of their choice. And the Voting Rights Act also takes into account whether there is racially polarized voting. Because in a world where, white voters, black voters, language minorities, there was no distinction as to what kind of candidate they voted for, then it wouldn't really matter whether there is as enough protection, to ensure that language minorities and racial minorities actually can elect the candidate of their choice. But where you have a situation where, look, it just so happens that white voters often prefer the candidate that black voters do not, and white voters will not vote for black candidates, that creates this problem that the Voting Rights Act is really zeroed in on, which is, again, like locking black voters and black candidates out of power. I mean, this Voting Rights Act case that the court is hearing now arose out of Louisiana. Louisiana has never elected a black official to statewide office. Like, that's how racially polarized the voting is, even though Louisiana is made up with 1/3 black citizens. So you might expect, again, like in a world without racially polarized voting, for the state to occasionally elect black candidates for statewide office. And it has elected black candidates, again, from districts that the Voting Rights Act has required the state to give black voters the opportunity for political power that the state would otherwise deny to them.
And so we go back again to this situation where the state, a state like Louisiana, that has never had that happen, even with the remedy that we would say is in place that's there, it still keeps repeating itself and not having really true representation of the citizens that are part of that, a good percentage of that state. Talk a little bit about the North Carolina situation in terms of their legislative map. I know that, yeah.
Sigh. Where to start? So what North Carolina is doing, I think that previews the future if the Supreme Court actually nullified and didn't allow the federal government to enforce or voters to enforce the Voting Rights Act. Because what North Carolina is doing is they are drawing new maps, new districts to try to give Republicans even more power. So your listeners are probably familiar with the phenomenon known as partisan gerrymandering, where legislatures draw districts to advantage one political party rather than the other. You know, this is what Donald Trump has encouraged states like Texas or other states that are led by Republican legislatures to do, to redraw their maps to lock in more safe Republican seats and effectively lock out Democratic voters from power. And the Voting Rights Act has restricted that practice because it doesn't allow the state to draw districts in ways that, again, lock out racial minorities from political power, where it would be very easy and possible for the state to draw districts where minority voters had the opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. So even when Republican legislatures are trying really hard to engage in partisan gerrymandering and secure for themselves like the maximum advantage they can for Republican candidates, the Voting Rights Act has to date limited their ability to lock out Black voters and language minorities and other racial minorities from political power, because it says, look, you can't basically erase their political power if, again, you could draw districts where they actually had political opportunities. And what North Carolina is doing is North Carolina had a map that basically gave Republicans 10 out of the 13 seats in North Carolina's delegation. That was a partisan gerrymander. And it ensured that, you know, there would be a 10-3 Republican to Democratic split in the delegation, even when the statewide votes were like 50-50 between the parties. Like, partisan gerrymandering is a way of essentially beating democracy and saying, doesn't really matter what the voters want, like, we're just going to lock ourselves and entrench ourselves in power. Now North Carolina decided, you know what, a 10-3 map, that's no longer good enough for us. We want to draw an 11-2 map that would give Republicans safe 11 seats out of, again, a delegation of 13 in a state that oftentimes splits 50-50 in the voters. So what did they do? They broke up a district that was an opportunity district, a district where racial minorities had political opportunities to elect the candidate of their choice. And they would erase this seat that is currently held by a Black Democrat. And so that is a window into what the future of the voting rights, the future of the country looks like without the Voting Rights Act. It will allow Republican legislatures to erase minority voters' political power, erase seats that are currently held by probably the most diverse complement of officials, because, again, like these Voting Rights Act districts, they have allowed minority voters to elect minorities to office. And so what North Carolina is doing is they are redrawing maps that would lock out racial minorities from political power. And that is what other states would be allowed to do in the event the Supreme Court effectively makes it impossible to enforce Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
And this is where, and help us with this, you've got your thoughts about this thing called stare decisis. So help our listeners understand how this plays a role, I guess that's probably the best way I can phrase it, when it comes to precedent, because your point, if folks weren't able to follow the bouncing ball, is that once a domino falls in this space, then others can fall when it comes to what other states could do and then be supported by the Supreme Court, if I'm on track here, because there's precedent. But you've got an interesting take on stare decisis in this conversation. So help us with that before we go to our first break. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So stare decisis refers to the legal doctrine of respect for precedent. It tells the courts, including the Supreme Court, that if a court has already decided this matter, it's not your job to redecide and revisit every single legal question for all time. So the Supreme Court has upheld the constitutionality of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act repeatedly. It did so most recently 2 years ago in a case out of Alabama. If the justices actually had a smidge of respect for stare decisis, that would be the end of the case. You would just apply existing precedent and say, we said the Voting Rights Act is constitutional when it requires states to take into account whether their districts lock out minority voters from political power. Instead, at the oral argument in the Louisiana case, you had the Chief Justice basically criticizing the advocate who was defending the Voting Rights Act for starting with precedent that took our precedent, the court's previous precedent, as a given. That is literally what precedent as a given. And yet they were treating that as a reason to just ignore their prior case. The fact that it did take precedent as a given and just apply the court's existing precedent. So this court really is, I would say, hot to trot on revisiting earlier cases that it just doesn't like. And among those cases are cases that have upheld the Voting Rights Act and allowed Congress to actually enforce the 15th Amendment, which prohibits discrimination in voting on the basis of race, and the 14th Amendment, which guarantees the equal protection of the laws.
It's such a powerful part of a conversation, Professor Litman, because this current, I love the way that you put this current Supreme Court, particularly when you look at the conservative judges, and unfortunately we do have to talk about it that way, because it's not, I hate when I hear people say the Supreme Court is ruined. It is, but there's 3 justices that are trying to hold it up with the best that they can. We're okay now. We should be okay with saying specifically the conservative justices on the Supreme Court. They're the ones that are causing this. And frankly, to your point about where stare decisis lands, they don't want to be challenged on some of their previous rulings. And yes, coming into court, that's how you come in prepared. You know this, is having tried many cases and taught us all about it. You come to court with a baseline. The baseline is most times, it's precedent of previously settled law. Am I right or wrong?
Exactly. Again, a legal system would be completely unworkable if every case was an entirely new affair that courts had to decide every single question afresh. No legal system could operate that way. And yet that is what the justices are effectively doing, just inviting the parties to revisit, any case that they just don't like.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, Professor. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
Still struggling with gas, bloat, constipation, nausea, or diarrhea? Have you tried eliminating foods but felt no change? It's time to call the tummy whisperer, Renee Barish at Digestive Health Solutions. Renee uses targeted testing to reveal exactly what's happening in your gut. Gut bacteria plays a key role in all your body functions, from cardiovascular regulation to brain function. When the gut is imbalanced, you may experience symptoms that extend beyond the gut, such as anxiety, skin issues, poor sleep, or increased risk for disease. Digestive Health Solution uses advanced testing to identify harmful microbes and evaluate the overall balance of the gut ecosystem. Get insights into your health, digestion, and how your microbiome affects all aspects of your body. Stop suffering. Call Renee now at 847-207-2034 or visit thetummywhisperer.com. That number is 847-207-2034. Let's get you feeling better. The Tummy Whisperer.
You're listening to WCPT 820. Here's the latest Chicago weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see sunny skies here for today with a high in the mid-50s. Winds out of the northwest around 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting as high as 20. And then for tonight, mostly clear, a low near 36. By Friday, sunshine, a high of 54 degrees. Saturday, plenty of blue skies and sun, a high of 57. By Sunday, partial sunshine, a high around 59. That's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 39.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Choose Views with Richard Chu.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being with us, and thank you to Professor Leah Litman, author of the New York Times bestseller Lawless, How the Supreme Court Runs on Conservative Grievance, Fringe Theories, and Bad Vibes. And there's a lot of bad vibe right now, Professor Litman, in the country when it comes to SCOTUS, or certainly the cases that they're taking, and unfortunately how they are overturning lower court rulings. I mean, it's got to not only frustrate you, but it's got to really tick you off, because they just seem to be looking for cases that they can find a way to overturn, and it's a little haunting for a lot of people, because we've for the longest time kind of looked to the Supreme Court, looked to the court systems in general, but certainly the higher up the court ladder you go, that the rulings were going to really be based on the law, not this sort of movement that the Supreme Court has taken upon itself, or certainly the conservative justices. So I know that's got to be frustrating to you. The question that I get asked a lot, I've had three people. We have two people that have sent me texts this morning, and even a caller that says, okay, so what do we do? How do we deal with this? One of our callers, Pam, asked the question, how do we deal with the Supreme Court that now is leaning so hard in this direction of overturning cases, maybe taking cases that should be left to the lower courts? Big question, not looking to you for a singular answer, but what would you, in answering that, say to people who are asking it, and what we should be doing and in this fight right now?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot, and I also get asked some version of that question a lot. And my intuition is to encourage people to think about short-term and long-term. And in the short term, realistically, I think we need to recalibrate, what we consider victories. And I don't think we should undersell the importance of harm prevention or harm mitigation, because there are a bunch of lower courts, the federal trial courts, the federal courts of appeal, that are still taking law seriously, that are enforcing the law against the Trump administration. Now, sometimes the Trump administration runs up to the Supreme Court and asks mommy and daddy, to basically get them out of the rules. And oftentimes the Supreme Court agrees. But the Trump administration isn't running off to the Supreme Court to challenge every single unfavorable decision in the lower federal courts. And so part of the perspective I ask people to have is to encourage them to think about how the lower courts, they're still doing their job. And so we should find ways of supporting them and supporting the institutions and litigants who are trying to enforce the law against the Trump administration and uphold, critical premises and components of our constitutional democracy. And again, even if some of these rulings are upended later on down the road, we at least delayed some of the harm and mitigated the harm. So that's one thing. And then there is the longer term question. And here I encourage people to think about how the right-wing legal movement's effort to take over the Supreme Court was a 4+ decade project. So we shouldn't expect there to be a magic solution that is just going to appear when we go to the ballots in the midterms. I think we need to be focused on how do we build a base of people that understands how much of, frankly, a threat the Supreme Court is to our democracy. Because if you convince enough people about that, then you will affect the calculus of elected officials about whether they want to adopt the kinds of laws and reforms that might actually safeguard our democracy from the Supreme Court. So that means, participating in local democracy, participating in endorsement meetings, participating in protests, participating in organizing. This last weekend, as part of the No Kings protests, I was out with my partner and I carried a sign that read, "No Kings and no Kavanaugh stops." Kavanaugh stops is the term that is used to describe the abhorrent and excessive enforcement practices of ICE officials, throwing people out of the car, zip tying them, refusing to take their word that they're a citizen. Because Brett Kavanaugh, when he allowed the Trump administration to deploy roving immigration patrols that would engage in racial profiling, he said, what's the big deal? All these immigration officers are doing is briefly stopping people and they promptly let them go if they, prove that they are citizens. That's obviously not what's happening. And so people asked, at the protest, what's a Kavanaugh stop? And I got to tell them, the ridiculous things that the Supreme Court and specifically Brett Kavanaugh have said about what is happening in our cities to our neighbors and our friends. And so I think we should look for opportunities to educate people about the Supreme Court, to stay involved in our democracy, and to build a movement that wants to shore up the integrity of our institutions, including the Supreme Court.
Kavanaugh stops. Yeah, I had almost forgotten about that. So thank you for reminding us of that, Professor Litman. The Chicago is obviously, kind of ground zero when it comes to what's happening with ICE raids and ICE involvement. And now this request by the Trump administration for the National Guard to be on the streets of Chicago, and it'd be an official act that he can take. And so this is a ruling that is on the table. And talk to us a little bit about this shadow docket application and what it not just means for Chicago, but what it potentially could mean for the rest of the country.
I think this shadow docket application out of Chicago is maybe the most significant application that the Supreme Court has faced. And the federal government is asking the Supreme Court to stay or pause a lower court decision that had concluded it was illegal for the president to deploy the National Guard in Chicago. The shadow docket, as your listeners probably know, refers to the set of emergency applications and requests the Supreme Court receives and decides outside of the regular docket. So on the shadow docket, they don't get full briefing. They don't hear oral argument, and they might not issue opinions or offer any reasons or explanations for their decision at all. And it's the shadow docket that the Supreme Court has used to allow the Trump administration to implement just a host of policies, including gutting the Department of Education or continuing to withhold hundreds of millions of dollars in medical research grants. And so now the Trump administration is up at the Supreme Court asking them to block the lower court decision that had told the Trump administration it is illegal for you to deploy the National Guard in Chicago. And I say this case is maybe the most important that the court has faced so far because it really tees up the question of, can the president basically invent or make up emergencies in order to give himself additional power? And do the facts matter? Because the facts in Chicago just do not warrant, deploying the National Guard. They just don't, right? There are protests. That is a First Amendment right that people have that is part of our democracy. And even if some people, in some places violate some laws as part of those protests, that has never been thought to be sufficient to allow the president to deploy the military against fellow American citizens. You have state and local law enforcement officers arresting people and helping to ensure that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, can continue to operate out of the Broadview facility outside of Chicago and more generally within the city of Chicago. State and local law enforcement, they formed a task force, to ensure that they would be enforcing the law in ways that allowed the Trump administration to do what it was going to do by way of enforcing immigration law. There is no crisis that warrants something as drastic as, again, turning members of the National Guard, the military, against fellow Americans. And I think that is one of the more chilling exercises of presidential power. And it's the combination of those two things, this ability to militarize law enforcement and just throw around the military when you think it's politically useful to you, coupled with, again, the lack of any factual basis for justifying using the military in these circumstances, in this place, that makes this application very important in my eyes.
There's no question about it. And again, thank you for breaking that down, because a lot of people don't understand. And I've just been trying to highlight and amplify why this is so important. And because it has it's far reaching. I mean, what's happening in Portland, what's happening in Memphis, what's happening obviously in California. These deployments then just basically become a domino effect, because to go back to talking about stare decisis, they'll use, meaning the federal government, specifically the Trump regime, will use the Supreme Court shadow docket ruling to then justify and say, well, we can go into Portland now, we can go into any other city because we've got. And in my mind, maybe I'm wrong, they won't even ask the Supreme Court at that point to be able to go into another city. They'll just do it because at that point, they won't have to worry about what any court system will do, because they'll refer back to the standing in Chicago. Am I right or wrong? Or
no, that's absolutely right. If the Supreme Court says the Trump administration can deploy the National Guard in Chicago, then people will have a more difficult time challenging the administration's efforts to deploy the National Guard elsewhere. I mean, there are reports that they are gearing up and going to deploy in San Francisco. There's no indication he is going to stop at the deployments that have happened thus far in Chicago, D.C., L.A., and Memphis. I think indications are like they want to engage in this on a broader, more widespread scale. And if the Supreme Court signs off on the deployment in Chicago, that is going to make it more difficult to challenge possible deployments elsewhere.
Yeah, that one of our listeners, and we got a flood of comments and responses. I know we can't get them all on, but I do want to say that this is a question and a statement, and it's about expanding the Supreme Court. Next time that there's a Democratic president, that we need to expand the Supreme Court. And one person said appoint Hillary, Michelle Obama, and Kamala Harris, and a few more to the Supreme Court. But that's going to take us winning back the House and the Senate to be able to get even close to having that conversation, I think, because the Republicans, if they still have those handles on their hands on those levers in terms of the House and the Senate, it'll be a really, really tough pull to get that done. But I've been of the mindset for a long time, Professor Litman, that expanding to match the federal court is probably a smart idea, or again, I mean, you've heard this, you probably get this comment or statement or question every day of your life, but where do you land on the expansion of the court?
I think that is basically a necessary component of shoring up our institutions for getting ourselves out of this mess and ensuring we don't slide back into it in the near future. The way I put it to people is, look, the Supreme Court is about to nullify what remains of the Voting Rights Act, the most important and successful and significant civil rights law in this country. So whatever you want the next Democratic-controlled Congress and Democratic president to do, whether that's protect more voting rights, whether that is meaningful steps to address the climate crisis and climate regulation, whether that is gun control, whether that is getting dark money out of politics and elections. Those are all things the Supreme Court could shut down, and I think would likely shut down in the event a Democratic administration and Democratic-controlled Congress tried to do those things. And if that's right, or frankly, even if there is like a reasonable probability of those things happening, then I think it is incumbent on us to make sure our democracy is the kind of place that can actually protect itself and ensure it remains a democracy.
Yeah, because right now they want to make the unitary executive theory more than just a theory and provide unwielded power to this current president. And we know where that will go. Let's take a quick break, Professor Litman. The number is 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
Cashback is not available on gas in New Jersey and Wisconsin. $5,000. That's the average amount of money people in the U.S. are now spending on gas in a year. $5,000. That's crazy. If you drive, you have to download Upside, the free app that gives you cash back every time you get gas. That's right. You can earn real cash back with Upside just by buying the gas you're already buying. You can literally start earning cash back today.
I use Upside every time I fill up, and I've already made around $300.
You're putting gas in your car anyway. Why not get real cash back? If you like free money, download Upside.
I'm saving the cash I earn from using Upside to help pay for a vacation later this year.
Download the free Upside app now to earn cash back every time you buy gas. Use promo code MEGA25 to get an extra 25 cents per gallon on your first tank. You can cash out anytime right to your bank, PayPal, or a gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Upside app and use promo code MEGA25 for a 25 cents per gallon bonus on your first tank. That's code MEGA25 for a 25 cents per gallon bonus.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chu.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. And we have with us the author of the best-selling book, Lawless, and that's Professor Leah Litman. Hey, Professor, let me ask you this question about, you've got a couple of good partners in crime when it comes to your podcast, Strict Scrutiny. Talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about your podcast for a minute. What's that been like?
Sure. So Strict Scrutiny is a weekly podcast that focuses on the Supreme Court and the legal culture that shapes the court and surrounds the court. And I co-host that podcast along with two other law professors, Melissa Murray, who is a professor at NYU Law, and Kate Shaw, who is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. And every week we break down what decisions the Supreme Court issued, what oral arguments they heard, as well as what's happening with the lower courts and other kind of legal adjacent news. And we started the podcast more than 6 years ago at this point. We're in our 7th season, and we started it in summer of 2019. And that was the year after Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed to the Supreme Court. And we felt at the time that people were not sufficiently appreciating how significant that appointment would be as far as the future direction of the Supreme Court and the decisions it was likely to issue. And so we wanted to provide people with more information about the court, which is a notoriously opaque institution that makes itself quite difficult to follow, because unless you practice law at the Supreme Court, unless you have clerked at the Supreme Court, unless you really study it, often it's a little bit difficult to know what's happening, like what schedule the court operates on, why it hears cases the way it does, when to expect decisions on the shadow docket, when to expect decisions in argued cases. And we wanted to democratize information about the Supreme Court. And so we started this podcast, and we have been doing it ever since. We actually just did a live show in Chicago at the beginning of October where we previewed the upcoming Supreme Court term.
And what were some of the preview. I mean, I know the answer because I had a chance to, but share with our listeners what some of those findings are.
So we've talked about the big Voting Rights Act, of course, that the Supreme Court, the big Voting Rights Act case that the Supreme Court is hearing this term, which is very significant, as we talked about earlier in the hour. We also talked about how the Supreme Court already has on its docket several big cases involving the Trump administration. The next month, they are going to decide whether the president's tariffs are legal, whether the president has legal authority to basically be firing off these kind of random and erratic tariffs on a range of different goods that don't seem to really be tied to anything happening in the United States economy or global economy. The court is also going to decide whether the president has the authority to fire federal officials who had multi-member commissions like the Federal Trade Commission or the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And if the court says the president can fire those officials, it is going to overrule its near centuries-old decision that had upheld Congress's authority to insulate certain federal officials from presidential control and presidential influence. They're also going to decide the case about the Federal Reserve governor and whether Donald Trump had the authority to remove Governor Cook from her position on the Federal Reserve Board based on what seemed to be pretty tenuous and sparse allegations of mortgage fraud. And those are the cases that we know the Supreme Court is going to hear, but it's likely that they are going to continue reviewing a bunch of matters on the shadow docket, which really develop quite quickly and can get to the court quite quickly. And so they are likely to be issuing, a flurry of shadow docket orders over the next year as well. And some might honestly involve policies that don't even exist at this point just yet. So those are two kind of big aspects of the Supreme Court's upcoming term. There are also some pretty important cases on LGBT rights. So this past month, the Supreme Court heard a challenge to a state law banning the practice of conversion therapy, which is where licensed professional therapists attempt to counsel someone, out of being gay or out of being bisexual or out of being transgender and try to actually change their behavior. So the question in that case is whether those restrictions on licensed professional therapists violate the First Amendment. And the court is also potentially going to hear cases that challenge states' exclusion of transgender athletes from participating in school sports. I say the court may try to hear this because the plaintiffs in those cases, the individuals who had challenged the schools or states' policies of excluding trans athletes, have, let's say, been trying to moot the cases, to settle them or to say, look, we've graduated, to ensure the Supreme Court won't decide them.
Right, because they won't even take the case.
Exactly. Yes.
Sometimes a strategy that you come up with may not be the ones that you wanted to initially start with when it comes to a case, but it may be what's necessary for preservation purposes. And in this case, with the trans cases, that may be the better route, given the timing of all this. I don't know, but I'm just looking at it as someone trying to be practical and pragmatic. That might be the better course of action. Not giving in, but just recognizing that a ruling could be more devastating. Is that probably a fair way to look at it?
Exactly. That's kind of the strategy, because some lower courts have decisions that have recognized, it violates federal law, be it federal statutes or the Constitution, to just discriminate against trans athletes and effectively keep them out of sports. And having the Supreme Court avoid ruling on those questions, could preserve those lower court rulings in a way that if the Supreme Court actually decides the matter and pulls the trigger, then it would kind of settle the issue for the country. Yeah.
And it's so sometimes that strategy, a little bit of the deference in this particular case may actually be a win, as hard as that may be to accept. we're wrapping up, and Professor Litman, I so appreciate you being with us. I'm a student of this stuff, and I kind of gobble it up. Many people that know me will say, yeah, you can't put Richard in a situation where he's talking to a professor of law because, but I appreciate you. I know our listeners do all over the country because some of this is kind of mystical. It's out there. It's hard to reach. It's hard to understand. We suddenly hear the headlines or we see the headlines of the Supreme Court is at it again. And people, I think some cases, unfortunately, may turn off to it. So I appreciate you putting a different light on this. And like your book so masterfully does, is it takes this complicated stuff and breaks it down to sort of bite-sized pieces where people can take it in and better understand the work. So kudos to you there. As we wrap up, and I always like to wrap up on a solid note or as best possible. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, Professor Litman, but one more go at it with regard to what you think we should all be doing right now, as to the best of our abilities to navigate in this crazy SCOTUS time.
I think trying to shore up and help out the lower court judges and litigants who are doing their best to try to stand up for the law against the Trump administration. And then I also think building and investing in a long-term movement that is designed to convince people that we need to shore up our institutions and make our institutions more democratic in order to ensure we don't slide back into autocracy for when we find our way out of this mess.
Yeah, good words, good advice. Professor Leah Litman, the author of the best-selling New York Times book, Lawless, How the Supreme Court Runs on Conservative Grievance, Fringe Theories, and Bad Vibes. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. And by the way, guys, check out their podcast. It's hugely informative, Strict Scrutiny. Make sure you make your way over there. Get yourself a copy of the book. Thanks, Professor Litman, for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, guys, what can I say? Class is over. Professor Litman brought it to us like we need to hear it. Thanks for being with us today. Take a deep breath and make your life count. We'll see you tomorrow.
This is Tony Moray. I'm an estate planning lawyer who drafts living trusts and wills. Since the election, I've been hearing from my clients, many of them fellow WCPT listeners. And we all wonder, how did this happen and what can we do? The how is, of course, very complicated. My thoughts as regard to what we can do is simple but important. We need to take extra care of those we love. Having an estate plan using either a living trust or will can provide comfort in uncertain times like these. When the progressive values we hold dear are under attack, I feel we must make sure that our personal lives are secure and then work out from there. I've been drafting estate plans for my clients for over 30 years, and I will use all of that experience to help you. Please call me at 847-996-0496.